he's obviously getting completely flamed for this. But just to go ahead and be like, well, you know, my family and I, we have such a deep connection with the program that it would sincerely just be wrong for us to play a concert on the night when such a sacred event such as Duke versus UNC is going on. So,
hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fight's Final Four preview show. We got the breakdown for all the DFS contests for this weekend's Final Four matchup. I'm Dan Watkins, joined by the great duo from Rotowire, John McKechnie and Nick Whalen. Gentlemen, how we doing? Blue Blood Invitational. How do we feel?
Feeling okay. I felt like on Sunday, America was kind of facing that, like the superhero meme where he's looking at the two buttons and sweating. And you know, option A was St. Peter's making the Final Four, and option B was having UNC and Duke play each other in the Final Four. So, you know, tough call either way, but I think we get a better overall product this way, even though UNC is an 8 seed. They obviously haven't been playing like an 8 seed. We talked about them a good bit on last week's show and how dominant that they've been. So I think this sets up as an awesome weekend. I mean, like, it's storylines galore insofar as Duke, UNC, Coach K, his last run, everything that goes with that is just, you know, it's, if we thought that the Coach K's final game at Cameron was like a big deal, this is that like times 1,000, which is incredible. And, you know, it's amazing when you have something of this magnitude to where a matchup like Kansas versus Villanova gets the total second billing in a way
right.
that it does. Like, no one is talking about that game other than the Justin Moore injury, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, where do you guys think this game actually ranks in terms of most anticipated Final Four games? Because, you know, I've seen a lot of talk of, like, you know, is this the biggest one since like the UNLV Duke rematch in the early 90s? And it's hard to think of a singular game. Like, there are games that I think in retrospect say, like, wow, that was incredible. Like, you know, the one that always comes to mind for me is like that legendary D Brown Illinois team against Oklahoma State. And then I think they played Arizona later in the tournament. And, you know, those games were massive in retrospect, but I don't think they had quite the same kind of buildup as Duke UNC. And I will admit, I was rooting for St. Peter's. I wanted a Duke St. Peter's showdown. And I'd be interested to see where you guys come in on this. I saw a lot of debate on Twitter about it. Carolina versus Duke, like, which would have been the bigger story? I think there's a pretty strong case to be made that Duke Carolina is the more marketable game for a lot of reasons. You know, obviously Carolina is a 500 times bigger program than St. Peter's, but I think the storyline of, like, at this point, maybe the greatest Cinderella story of all time, going up against not only Duke, but Duke in Coach K's final tournament. Like, to me, I almost think that would have been a game. I think that would have drawn in more casual fans.
I think it's the to steal the cliche, it's the ultimate. It would have been the ultimate David versus Goliath matchup. But at some point, I mean, what we saw in the Elite Eight, that game was over in 2 minutes. We all knew that was going to happen eventually, right? With St. Peter's, the wheels were just going to completely fall off. And I'm glad it happened on the second weekend and it didn't, you know, linger into this Final Four. Because I think this Final Four, man, I mean, definitely since 2008 when all four number ones made it. But I mean, in our lifetimes, I can't think of one that's had more hype around it than this weekend going into it.
Just having Duke alone make it this far, when, you know, coming into the tournament, this was not a guarantee. You know, and it feels like Duke has played so well in the tournament that you look back and you're like, yeah, of course they were going to be here. But think about what we thought about Duke coming into the NCAA tournament, like coming off of the ACC tournament, coming off of a loss at the end of the ACC season. I think, I mean, I picked them to lose, I think, in the Sweet 16. A lot of people, you know, were thinking that this is the type of team that could be tripped up. Like, they reminded me a lot of the Jabari Parker Duke team that I think lost to Mercer that year. And, you know, they were always like good, not great in the regular season. I thought there were a lot of parallels between Jabari and Paolo Banchero, who, you know, ironically, I think he had the most questions of all of the top NBA draft guys coming into the tournament. And it feels like everyone else has lost some stock. You know, all the guys that, like, in the games that they've been knocked out, Davis to Ben Mathurin to Jaden Ivey, like, those guys have all struggled. Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, like, Banchero's stock just continues to rise and rise. And all the other guys he was competing against for, you know, a top 3 to 5 NBA draft pick, all those guys have been knocked out. So I think that's been one of the bigger pleasant surprises of this whole run for me is Paolo Banchero has been at the center of this for Duke.
Super consistent.
Yeah. I think you know, what you're saying about the Duke narrative and, you know, the track record that they had laid out over the course of the season and in the first weekend of the tournament, they kind of just had this amazing, like, crystallizing moment against Texas Tech, where Texas Tech was throwing their best punch every single time, and Duke was able to respond not only with their A-plus star players like a Banchero, but like Roach was just absolutely nails down the stretch in that game, and you just kind of like come to realize, like, wait a second, like, everyone on Duke is extremely good, whereas Texas Tech, like they got three guys who are obviously like carrying them to this point, but at a certain point, like even Duke's fifth guy can be the best player on the floor for a given stretch. And I think that's what makes Duke so scary going into this weekend.
So how do you guys want Coach K's story to end here? Do you want him to lose to North Carolina? Do you want him to make it to the national championship and then lose Monday night? Or do you want him to win it all and walk off to the sunset with another championship?
Now that he's here, I almost want him to win it. I've never really hated Duke, I feel like, as much as I should, especially given what they did to Frank Kaminsky in that Wisconsin team. The lowest moment, I think, of my sporting life, which is saying a lot as someone who's been a Jaguars fan for 29 years. Like, think about what that means. But I don't know. It's a cool story at this point. I think there would have been, for people who don't like Duke, seeing them lose in like round one or round two would have been a really satisfying ending. And if you're a North Carolina fan, obviously having the chance to Coach K in his last game at Cameron and then knock him out of the tournament in his final four would also be kind of a fun narrative. But I'm not that much of a Duke hater. I like I said, I don't have a strong allegiance toward North Carolina. I don't have a strong allegiance toward Kansas or Villanova. And you said it, John, like that game feels like such an afterthought at this point. You have like the most consistent two teams in the country, really, in Kansas and Villanova. And I'm just like, yeah, let's just simulate that one. And I wish Duke-UNC was the national title game. So I guess at this point, he's made it far enough. Might as well have him finish it out.
I guess for me, it is tricky. I'm not like, unless it is a team that I am specifically rooting for, I'm not a big ride off into the sunset guy, personally. So
yeah, you never have been.
No, it's well known, well established out there. But I've been a Duke hater, for lack of a better word, since I began following college basketball as a young lad, and so I'm glad that we get the type of setup that we deserve, because Coach K is pretty much the greatest basketball or college basketball coach of all time, or arguably certainly on the Mount Rushmore. So I'm glad that we do get like this marquee of a matchup to kind of help punctuate his career. But at the end of the day, I cannot find it within myself to root for Duke. I don't know if they're going to beat North Carolina or win it all, but I'm hoping that they don't go out on top. Hopefully not offending too many of our Duke viewers here.
Yeah, I'm hoping they get there Monday night and lose. I want them to lose Monday night. There we go.
It would be more fitting if they lost to UNC. I feel like because even getting to the title game feels like a success for Coach K. Like I don't think people would look back and say, like, well, Coach K choked again in his final season. Like I still think like getting this far is almost a success, and I'm sure Coach K, or as Tom Cream calls him, Mike K, would not say that himself. But just getting this far with a team that like I said 5 minutes ago, like, this was not a guarantee at all. And looking back, they are the most talented team. They are the best coach team, but it didn't really feel like they had the right kind of momentum coming into this tournament. And, here we are now with this great Final Four matchup. The only thing for me is I wish, like, obviously UNC is good. They made it to the Final Four. They beat Duke a couple weeks ago. I do wish this UNC team was like a little more loaded, because it feels like Duke is rightfully, somewhat heavy favorites in this game. Like, I wish this was like the Rashad McCants UNC team, where you're really saying, like, man to man, these teams can match up really well. And Caleb Love, Baycott, those guys have played awesome over the last few weeks, but pretty much every metric you point to says Duke has the advantage at every spot.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for North Carolina fans, though, they're playing their best basketball this season. And I have a couple buddies that are big UNC fans, and I talk to them. I go, "Were you expecting this? Like, be honest with me." And they're like, "Oh yeah, at the beginning of the year we were expecting this." I'm like, okay, yep, sure you were.
Okay, yeah. When you lose to Wake Forest,
yeah. Anyway, so I don't know if you guys have seen this, but one of the big kind of like social media things that's going around with this Final Four is Saturday night, Eric Church was supposed to play a concert in San Antonio. He is no longer playing that concert, as he wrote a letter to his fans saying that he's canceling so he can go watch the North Carolina Duke game, because apparently he's a huge UNC fan. I have the letter right here in front of me, and I want to read it to you guys because it is just fantastic. So, to the church choir, Not a bad fan base name. That's not bad.
I don't know.
This Saturday, my family and I are going to stand together to cheer on the Tar Heels as the team has made it to the Final Four. As a lifelong Carolina basketball fan, I've watched Carolina and Duke battle over the years, but to have them match up in the Final Four for the first time in the history of the NCAA tournament is any sports enthusiast's dream. This is also the most selfish thing I've ever asked the choir to do, to give up your Saturday night plans with us so that I can have this moment with my family and sports community. However, it's that same type of passion felt by the people who fill the seats at our concerts that make us want to be part of a crowd at a game of this significance. Woody Durham always said, quote, "Go where you go and do what you do. Thanks for letting me go here and be with the Tar Heels." John, how do you feel?
Really impressive rhetorical work from Eric Church there. Just truly using his family and his background to shield himself from, or attempt to shield himself. He's obviously getting completely flamed for this, but just to go ahead and be like, well, my family and I, we have such a deep connection with the program that it would sincerely just be wrong for us to play a concert on a night when such a sacred event such as Duke versus UNC is going on. So very funny letter. I imagine, I know that there's a PGA event this week in San Antonio. I'm sure some people were like, let's go to the golf event, and then Saturday night we're going to Eric Church, a huge San Antonio week. This is going to be amazing. And, he just pops the balloon for everybody. So, there's a certain level of supervillain that I almost respect about this, but like at just sort of like a guy who doesn't really listen to Eric Church level, I would be, or I think that this is a kind of a lame move on his part. It'd be funny if they were able to like get the rights to be able to like have the game on like behind him or on like the foot monitors like during the concert or something, and he could like comment on the game throughout the show. But yeah, to just leave the choir twisting in the wind like that.
Yeah. I'm just shook by the church choir thing. I'm having a hard time moving past that. I did not know that he named his fan base the church choir. I'm going to need probably, 3 to 5 weeks to process that. But I mean, part of me respects the hell out of this as a sports fan, right? I mean, it's like, this is a big time concert. This is a big time, like headliner type of act. Eric Church is what, I mean, I don't really follow country music that much, but he's one of probably the 5 biggest acts in country music. Like, this isn't a guy like canceling a 500 person show at the Milwaukee Theater here. Like, this is big time. I assume this is like an arena type of venue. So this speaks to just how big of a sports fan he is and how much money he's probably forfeiting to go to this game. So I don't know. I kind of respect it in that regard.
So I can like both sides of this. So I like that, he's just full on honest about it. Like, you're going to cancel this week. If you're going to be an a-hole, be honest about why you're being an a-hole. Cause like the last thing he
could say like a family issue came up or something like that.
And then they show him in the crowd Saturday night.
Yeah, right.
And have that happen. But on the other hand, if he's such a big North Carolina fan, wouldn't you think he would not schedule a concert on the Saturday of the Final Four? Like,
well, this speaks to the Carolina fans not thinking their team was that good.
Right. But I mean, if you're a fan of that program, you're expecting to, probably be somewhat relevant every single spring here and have a shot. Beforehand. I don't know if this was a reschedule from a COVID thing or something like that. But when that tour out, man, especially if you're such a big North Carolina fan, I think you should keep Final Four Saturday open.
So the church lacked the faith in North Carolina,
right?
What you're saying.
Ironically, yeah. That is true. That is true. Absolutely. All right, let's talk about some of these matchups here. Let's start off with Villanova and Kansas. As Nick kind of alluded to, this is the one that no one's really talking about, but this is going to be a great basketball game, just fundamentally. Both these teams are just so solid. We have the absence of Justin Moore now, who I haven't even watched this because anytime I hear any non-contact injury, especially like with a calf or whatever, something like that, something popped. Yeah, don't want to see it. But anyways, he's out. So how much of an impact do you think that's going to have in this game? And then my other thing that I'm wondering here is, did Kansas flip the switch Sunday afternoon at halftime, and now are they just going to steamroll their way to Monday night and cut down the nets? So Nick, how do you feel about this matchup?
I mean, it does feel that way, right? And everyone you hear talk about it on podcasts, everything you read, it almost is assumed that, with Justin Moore out, Kansas is just going to cakewalk through this matchup. And I don't necessarily know that that's the case. I mean, it's a big time loss, to be sure. And the way it happened, I mean, just devastating. I too have refrained from watching the video. I am a massive, massive coward when it comes to watching like any kind of videos like that, especially involving Achilles tendons popping. That's like my biggest fear in the world. But at the end of the day, like it's still Villanova, right? I mean, it's not like it's a one-man show. You still have Gillespie. You still have a really deep roster of guys. Some are holdovers from the success that they've had in previous years. I do feel like the narrative has shifted maybe a little too much in that direction of like all of a sudden like they can't win without Justin Moore, who had 8 points on 2 of 10 shooting in their win over Houston. So I'm not saying it's not a big loss. It is significant. They're going to have to find a way around it. But I also don't think this just hands the game over to Kansas, which until the second half against Miami hadn't looked that great. I mean, Kansas's best player, Ochai Agbaji, was essentially invisible until the second half of that Miami game. He was like their fourth best player until then.
John?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the times, if a quarterback's out, then like it's a different sense. But I think that a lot of the time, a noteworthy player being out for a game, it tends to get a little bit overblown in the public. And like Nick said, it's not like Moore had been lighting the world on fire and necessarily carrying Villanova to this point. Obviously, he's an important piece. It hurts to lose him, but Jay Wright's a guy who develops depth. He's got guys that can play in his system, play his style. So I think that, if there's like a program that I trust a next man up approach, it probably is Villanova. And, I think that I do trust a guy like Gillespie to, really kind of galvanize the rest of this team. And I think that Villanova will still be able to play its game and shoot its threes and everything like that. So I think that they will still be able to remain competitive in this game, even without him. But yeah, to the point on Kansas, they did look pretty scary on Sunday afternoon, and McCormick only played a handful of minutes when they pulled away in the second half, but he was like, completely crushing it this anytime that he was on the floor. So Kansas does look scary, and this is a matchup of two other very, very elite level coaches in Bill Self and Jay Wright. So I do give the lean to Kansas. I just don't think that the Justin Moore absence is why Villanova loses. I think it has a little bit more to do with Kansas and the way that they've been playing of late.
And let's talk about some of the big names in this matchup. Ochai Agbaji, 15.5 points is the more or less on Rotowire.com that we're going to use this week. He's one of the 5 finalists for the Wooden Award, 18.9 points per game this season, but he's averaging just around 12 for the tournament. He finally scored 18 on Sunday against Miami. Nova's going to want to play a slow game. We've seen that in all of their tournament games and throughout the entire season, that they play a very slow pace. So can Kansas get the points for Agbaji to get over 15? John?
I'm skeptical on that one. I think that Villanova's bigger issue in this one is going to be stopping the guys down low and in the post, like a David McCormick, that type of thing. So I think Agbaji definitely has a strong game here, but 15.5, especially considering how he's played in the tournament thus far, and the perimeter like wing defense for Villanova, I think that slows him down just enough to where I'm taking the less on Agbaji's more or less there when it comes to the 15.5.
Nick?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, certainly he's capable of going over this. There's a reason he got the first team All-America spot in a year that was loaded with candidates. But yeah, he really hasn't been hunting his shot, I think, as much as I expected throughout this tournament. At 5 points, I think, in that Providence game. He kind of seems happy to be more of a role player, which is not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, you don't necessarily want him taking 25 shots on a team that has other options, but he's been happy to share the ball, with guys like McCormick, with like Connor Braun. I mean, Remy Martin, I think, was Kansas's best and most aggressive player despite coming off the bench throughout this tournament. So I think we see a similar game to what we've seen from Agbaji so far this season or this tournament, where maybe he takes somewhere between 9 and 11 shots. They spread the wealth a little bit. It's probably a pretty low scoring game. I mean, Villanova's not going to shoot 28% from the field like it did against Houston, but I think both of these teams are happy if this game is played in the 50s.
Then on the other side, you got Colin Gillespie. He's one of the few guys left from that 2019 national championship team. He's averaging 15.6 points per game this season. He's only averaging, though, around 13 in the tournament. We were big on him last week, and then Villanova just kind of grinded things to a halt and won very low-scoring, close games. He only had a total of 18 points on the second weekend in those two games. But Rotowire has his line set at 12.5, Nick, more or less for Gillespie in the Final Four.
I think that's low enough that you almost have to go more here, right? Especially with Justin Moore sidelined. It's a little concerning when you look at that box score in the Houston game and he had 6 points on 6 shots. But to me, that's more of a credit to Houston of the defense that they played in that game. I mean, both teams were under 30% from the field. It was similarly ugly on both sides. And that shows, of course, what Villanova and Houston are capable of on defense. But I don't think it's going to be quite that ugly. I know I just said the game could be played in the 50s. I think that's a possibility. I don't think we have a situation where Villanova is at like 28% from the field as a team. It is college basketball. Things can get ugly, but I don't think it's going to be quite that ugly. So asking Gillespie, with your number 2 or 3 scorer in Moore out, asking him to get to 13 points, that feels very realistic to me.
John?
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, Kansas really, really tough defensively. They rank 17th in opposing 3-point percentage, and that's a lot of Villanova's game. But I think Gillespie, goes maybe DiVincenzo mode and just goes ahead and carries them with his hot shooting. I know that, like we mentioned, the Villanova offense hasn't necessarily been humming, but they got a week to prepare for this. They're going to figure out a way to get him his shots, and really, again, with Moore being out, he does need to step up. I know I'm taking a walk down narrative street here, but a guy as experienced as Gillespie, knowing that this could be his last game, I think that he steps up, rises to the occasion. I do like his chances here.
Yeah, I like the more on this one too, just because I don't think he's going to shoot as bad as he did last weekend. 28% against Michigan, then 16% against Houston. I don't think he's going to do that for a straight game. So I'm going to go with the more there as well. Anyone else in this matchup you guys like? Jermaine Samuels had a very good second weekend for the Cats. Remy Martin, Nick, as you hinted at, had a very good weekend for the Jayhawks.
Yeah, I mean, those are the two guys certainly that stand out to me. I mean, Remy Martin kind of came back down to earth in that Miami game, only having 9 points in a game where Kansas scored 76 was certainly surprising. But I mean, you look back at that Providence game, like they needed every bit of his 23 points in that game. He got to the line 13 times, really, really good for a small guard. I think he's listed at 6 foot, looks a little smaller than that to me. So he's the guy, like if Abaji has one of those games where he's kind of floating and he's more than happy to just kind of be out there hanging out on the wing, I think Remy Martin is the guy that acts more as that shoot first type of player that really we haven't seen. Kansas doesn't really have guys like this, all that often. But he doesn't really fit the mold of a traditional Jayhawk, but really fun player to watch. And I think it can be good and bad. Like there are definitely times when I watch him and it's like, does this guy know that he has a first team All-American on his team? Like he's more than happy to he's one of those guys I think that has that mindset. Like when I'm out there, I'm the number one option, and that can be high risk, high reward. But so far it's worked out.
John?
Let's see here. If we could get a minutes more or less for my guy Chris Tehan on Kansas, I would love that. Chris Tehan, he plays pretty sparingly, but he has a mustache and he's got kind of like a flowing orange mullet thing going on. So the more of him, the better, I think, is for the sport in general. So if we could get a more or less of half a minute on Tehan, give me the more.
All right. Before we move on, Nick, your favorite Villanova Wildcat of all time?
Man. Oh, wow. I should have had a couple days to prepare for this. I mean, Scotty Reynolds, that's kind of the free space answer. That's who comes to mind. That.
We lose him? All right. John, your favorite Villanova Wildcat of all time?
It was the 2005 team when they started getting, they started kind of moving themselves into the era that we kind of know Villanova now. And, Scotty Reynolds was part of that. Alan Ray, I think was the one that I really enjoyed. He had, we've talked about gnarly injuries on this show earlier. He, the Big East tournament where he got poked in the eye, but yeah, Alan Ray was an awesome player. I really enjoyed him. And then, also, I think my overall favorite a fellow alum of Gonzaga College High School in DC, Chris Jenkins, who drained the game-winning three against North Carolina in the championship game. Big prideful moment for my high school alma mater. So Chris Jenkins has got to be top of my power rankings for Villanova.
Yeah, Allen Ray, definitely mine. I loved him in college. He was filthy, averaging like 18 points a game all 4 years. And I remember thinking, oh, this guy's going to be a stud in the NBA. And then like I get like NBA Live like 2007 and like going through like the rookie class, he was undrafted and he's like a 59 overall. And I was like, oh, okay, he's not that good. But yeah, Allen Ray is mine as well. Randy Foye on that team too. Those mid-aughts Villanova teams were not fun to play against as someone who rooted for both Syracuse and Boston College in those years. It was not a lot of fun. All right, let's move on to the Duke-UNC game. Paolo Banchero, Nick, 17.5 points is Rotowire's line for him is more or less. He averaged 17.1 during the season. He's averaging 18.5 in the tournament. 2 games this season against North Carolina, 23 and 13 points respectively. How do you feel about Banchero in this one?
Yeah, sorry if I cut out there, guys. I don't know if you heard my Villanova answers, hopefully, but if not, we can circle back on that. I don't know what's going on here. On the Banchero front, I'm going more. I think he's a different player now than he was, especially during that first UNC game that you mentioned. We had 13 points, 5 of 14 shooting. I think there's a clearly increased level of confidence where he's at now, even versus a couple weeks ago at the end of the ACC tournament. I think what he's doing, not only as a scorer, but as a playmaker for this team is very much advanced. And I think I kind of underrated what he brings in terms of that. And I feel like all year we've been searching for like, who is this guy's NBA comp? And the one that I've now settled on that I like a lot is like late prime Blake Griffin. Like the first year he was in Detroit when he was actually still pretty good. Like that's really who he reminded me of, watching that Arkansas game and watching that Texas Tech game last weekend, where if he's going to get all the way to the hole, he's going to finish. If somebody steps in front of him, he always makes the right pass. He's either dumping it down to Mark Williams, he's kicking it to the corner, to Roach or to Keels. But I think the confidence that he's playing with in this game, like the fact that Duke has not really been affected in this tournament by the Coach K storyline says a lot to me as well. I'm going more. My Duke stock is on the rise.
I like that comp. I like that comp a lot. Similar body type. John, what do you got for Banchero?
I've been sold on Banchero thanks to Whalen's analysis. I've more loosely following the NBA draft stuff, and I've been well aware of his stock throughout the course of the season. But he is playing extremely well right now. When I think of North Carolina, I do think that the strength of their defense specifically is down low, so that changes things a little bit, but Banchero can create and do enough there. So even though you'll have to contest with Manek and Baycott down low, I still feel like Banchero, the way that he's playing right now, I think that he might have like that Final Four moment in this one. So I like the more here as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go more on that one too. Caleb Love for UNC, 16.5 points is his more or less on Rotowire. He averaged 15.7 during regular season, averaging 18 in the tournament, highlighted by that Sweet 16 game against UCLA, where he dropped 27 in the second half. But 2 games against Duke this season, 2 different stories for Caleb Love, 22 in one of them, only 8 points in the other. John, how do you feel about Caleb Love in the Final Four?
I'm going to go with the less here. I'm not saying specifically that part of the reason why is because of all the terrible puns on the broadcast during his 30-point performance. The all you need is love stuff from was it Iron Eagle? It was I was crawling out of my skin like every time he made a shot. Not because I was mad that he was making the shots, but the puns were just horrendous, really. I think that the Duke, the perimeter defense will slow him down enough to where I think we're going to see the less here. I think that someone more like a Manek and a Baycott are going to have the bigger offensive impacts than he will.
Yeah, I mean, everyone who knows me knows how much I respect Iron Eagle, but even I had to draw the line somewhere last week, and it was getting completely out of hand. To me, it feels like Caleb Love is either going to go way over or way under. It doesn't feel like he's going to finish with like 15 or 17 points. That's kind of how it's been, even in this tournament. 23 points in the opener against Marquette. 5 points in that game against Baylor where they scored 93 points. He only has 5. And then, like you said, Dan, it looked like he was off to another bad game against UCLA, explodes in the second half of that one. He's very much reliant on the 3-point shot, which can be extremely sketchy game to game, especially at the college level. When you're talking about a guy who's taking almost 10 threes per game over his last 8, dating back to the ACC tournament. That worries me a little bit. Duke has the defenders. They have the size. They have the athleticism to match up with him. I lean toward the less here. But at the same time, it's like there's no way to predict what we saw in that second half against UCLA. Some of the shots that he's hitting were almost indefensible. But I think I lean toward the less.
All right. And then you got Brady Manick for the Heels. Kind of been the surprise a little bit of this tournament with how good he's played. He averaged 15.2 points per game during the regular season, averaging 21.5 in the tournament. Most of those coming on that first weekend. The second weekend kind of came back down a little bit, but still had 19 against St. Peter's. Against Duke, 20 and 21 in both games. So he's gone over 20 in both of them, or at least reached 20 rather. His more or less line is 15.5. Nick, how do you feel about Manick in this one?
I think I got to go more. I mean, he's been an absolute hoss for them, really dating back to about the middle of the ACC season. Something clicked for Brady Manick. I mean, he began the season coming off the bench. We weren't really sure what his role was going to be as a grad transfer. And it was right around like the end of January. They played NC State. They played Louisville, got some wins there. And now, counting these tournament games, his last 16 games, he's up to 18 points a game, 6.5 rebounds, 51% from the field, 41% from three, taking over 7 threes per game. So, between he and Caleb Love, they're accounting for like almost 23 pointers per game between them. And he's been, ridiculously consistent. He's got 17 straight games over 10 points. Obviously, he needs to get to 16 to go more here. And as reliant on the 3-point shot as he is, he brings a little more to the table, I think, than Love does outside of that realm. So I feel like I'm a little more confident in Manick having the higher floor in this game. So I'll go less on Love and I'll go more on Manick.
John?
Yeah, this one's tricky because you do feel like with the success that he's had against Duke this season, that Duke tries to draw something up a little bit more to ensure that he's not kind of like the big thorn in their side throughout the course of this game. Does that turn to funneling more shots to a guy like Love? I'm not totally sure, but I think that Manick is just efficient enough. And I do feel like even with, Duke maybe trying to hem him in a little bit, I think that he's going to get enough shot volume here to where I like I like his efficiency. I like his ability to score from outside and closer to the hoop. So for him and his beard, I got to go with the more.
All right. And last one here, Armando Bacot, 12.5 rebounds is what Rotowire has his line at. He averaged just shy of 13 during the season. He's averaging close to 16 in the tournament. He tied Tim Duncan on Sunday for the most double-doubles in a season in ACC history with 29. Duke, though, has done a good job keeping him off the glass this year in the 2 times they met. 5 rebounds and 7 rebounds, respectively, in those 2 contests. But I think he's setting the double-double record on Saturday night against Duke. And I like the more here as well, just the way he's playing on the glass. Nick?
Yeah, I think so too. I think this number is probably a little more friendly than most of these scoring numbers, which, are kind of right at averages. You look at where Bacot has been in terms of boards dating back to the end of the ACC season. I mean, he's at 14.6 rebounds per game over his last 11, 22 rebounds in that game against St. Peter's. Really not sure why he played 35 minutes in that game. Tweaked his ankle at the end. Looked like it maybe was a lot more serious at first than it ended up being. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Tim Duncan comparison. It's kind of neck and neck. Who would you rather have, Tim Duncan or Armando Bacot? But no, really, I mean, it does speak to how consistent he's been. And he's one of those guys that you watch. You're like, how is this guy not more of an NBA consideration? And obviously the game has changed, and he's more of a traditional type of big man. But you don't just luck your way into averaging 15 rebounds a game, over a 10+ game span. So regardless of how the outcome goes here, I mean, obviously asking him to go up against Mark Williams is a tough task, but I like the more. He seems to be, it almost seems like he knows that he has this kind of double-double thing on the line, and he's making a point to grab rebounds. No matter who you're playing, with the length of a college game, it's really hard to get 20+ rebounds. So I like Bacot to go over 12.5.
John?
Yeah, I think that this is a fairly safe more here as well. As long as he doesn't get into foul trouble, he's going to be a pretty dominant force on the glass. And Duke, as far as their rebounding metrics go, they just ranked 215th in the country. So even if they've limited him previously, they still overall aren't particularly good at stopping other teams from grabbing the boards. Bacot he has a nose for it. Like he's just a dominant rebounder. I have no doubts that he's going to continue to perform the way that he has to this point in the tournament, especially at that end of the floor or in that facet of the game. So I like the more on this one as well. I think that, he might settle in. We might see another like 15 rebound type of game from him.
All right, prediction time. Who will we be talking about on Monday for the national championship show? I'm going Duke versus Kansas. So taking both favorites.
I think we're going to see a surprise here, and the NCAA is going to say, you know what, Wisconsin, come on back in. We're going to have the winner of the Final Four actually play Wisconsin for the real title. No, I think Duke beats UNC, and I think Kansas beats Villanova. Nothing special there. It's kind of hard to throw out too much of a contrary take here. I mean, it already feels like a success to me that Coach K has made the Final Four. Might as well have him finish it out. I almost feel like getting here and playing in a city where Coach K has never made a Final Four, by the way. It feels like getting here was going to be the most difficult part, strangely, for Duke. And obviously you have two really tough games in front of you, but it kind of feels like the gauntlet is behind them. And now the goal is in front of them. And I think Duke takes care of business by the end of the weekend.
I'll go with, both favorites here as well. I just think, it's not the Justin Moore thing. It's just like, I think that Kansas is a really, really tough team to beat at this stage. So I think that they will be able to beat up on Villanova on the inside. And I think that they'll be able to get the job done. They'll be playing on Monday. And I think Duke just kind of out talents UNC at the end of the day. And, like Nick was talking about, if UNC is to have a cold night shooting from three, this one could be like a pretty long night for them. So I think Duke's just kind of overall talent edge and the kind of like thin margin of error that UNC is working with, I think it ends up cutting against them a little bit this week. So I'm thinking it's a Duke-Kansas game on Monday night.
Look at that, in agreement across the board. All right, well, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube page, and good luck with your contests, and we'll talk to you on Monday.